Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bloomerang Academy, where my dog Annabelle is trying to be a part of the session today. So I'm going to apologize to start with that she is being so vocal, but apparently she has a lot to say about this topic today. So we're so glad that you're joining us. If you would, go ahead and put in the chat where you're joining us from today and what the weather is like where you are. Today here in Indianapolis, it's cloudy and about 48 degrees. So we got a little bit of a cloudy start today, but we're super happy to be here with you. If you're joining us and for any reason you should need our dial-in number, perhaps you have translation issues or any other reason if your audio drops, the number is 1-669-900-6833, and I will drop that in the chat in just a moment in case you need it later in the session. Just a few housekeeping items before we start. We do have a live transcript available, so if you would like to be able to see the scrolling text as we're going through the session today, please click on that button on your toolbar. A couple of quick side notes. The chat that you're using so wonderfully right now to tell us all about the weather where you are is a great place to be able to share best practices, or maybe if you have an idea around what Jessie is presenting today, or if you've used it and want to share a little bit about it. So it's kind of a place where you can join in the conversation with everyone else in the group. But if you do happen to have a question for the presenter today, please put that into the Q&A if you would. That way we don't lose it inside the chat. Sometimes the chat gets busy and then it's hard to find those questions. So that's kind of the difference between those two. A couple other housekeeping items. The resources mentioned in this session will be linked and they will be presented to you at the end of the session. Later today, you're going to receive an email with the slides and the recording from this session. So please don't worry about trying to jot down anything. You'll have everything you need in that email. Any questions we're not able to answer live today, we will certainly circle back to you. So don't worry if your question doesn't get answered during this webinar, we will follow up with you. And if you need any further assistance with your Bloomerang product, remember you can always contact our amazing support team at support@bloomerang.com. So today we are so fortunate to have our amazing partner with us, Zapier, and we're going to be talking about automating membership management. And we have Jessie Gilchrist with us, who is a certified expert and Bloomerang integrations consultant. And of course, Zapier is an amazing partner. They specialize in system automations for Bloomerang. So Jessie, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. Thank you for being here today.
Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead. Oh, looks like I need to steal a screen share from you.
There we go.
Awesome. Can everyone see my screen all right?
Looks good.
Awesome. Well, pleasure being here today, everyone. If you've attended any of our Bloomerang and Zapier Academy webinars in the past, this will start off like many of them, kind of entering Zapier and then diving into this use case we're going to cover today. So I'm a member of Psychic Solutions. As Margie mentioned, we are a Bloomerang partner that specializes in system automations for Bloomerang. So we've been a Bloomerang user since about 2013. And we're part of the team that helped to launch the Bloomerang Zapier app. So we love presenting on these webinars and sharing with you what Bloomerang and Zapier can do together. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my video off now because we're going to be doing some live demos today. I want to make sure you can really focus on those demos. So the goal of today's webinar is to show you how you can leverage Zapier to automate management of your membership program with Bloomerang. So Zapier can support your operational processes or your operational process and efforts by reducing the time you spend performing data entry and ensure consistency across how you are coding your members in Bloomerang. So we're going to start by entering Bloomerang and Zapier, how they work together, why Zapier integrations are a key feature of your Bloomerang system, and also your fundraising strategy. And then we're going to explore and demonstrate how you can use the Bloomerang Zapier app to set up a standard flow that updates a membership status and an expiration date on the constituents profile when new membership transactions are created. We're going to show how this kind of what we're calling our standard flow can be enhanced to account for if you have different membership levels or tiers. And then we are going to also talk about how Bloomerang scheduled reports and a parsing tool can be used to manage lapsed members as well. So lots of different use cases here regarding membership. And then we're going to wrap it up by talking about how you can get started using Bloomerang and Zapier. So we will have demos throughout the webinar today to show you how to set up these automations for your organization. And again, we are happy to answer questions, so feel free to send those in the Q&A. If there's anything I'm not able to get to, I'll make sure to follow up with you offline. Now, it's common for organizations of all sizes to use many types of software, and we believe that automated integrations are essential to your donor database. So integrations can help connect the different systems you use, creating a tech stack that supports your organization and your strategic goals. And this is where Zapier comes in. As some of you may not be familiar with Zapier, I want to start with a high-level overview of what Zapier is and why we believe it's a key feature of your Bloomerang system and also of your membership and fundraising efforts. Zapier is automation software that enables additional integration and fundraising opportunities beyond Bloomerang. So it really extends the bounds of your Bloomerang database. It's a middleware that sits in between Bloomerang and the other apps you use, helping them talk to each other. So the Bloomerang Zapier app extends the reach of your Bloomerang database by enabling integration with over 5,000 other applications in Zapier's directory. And Zapier was designed as a no-code platform, meaning that most anyone can build an integration in Zapier. You don't need to be a developer or no code to build an automation. The flexibility of the Zapier platform really enables custom integrations. So what this means is that you aren't limited to a one-size-fits-all workflow, mapping, or formatting. You really can build and design an automated solution that meets your organization's needs. Now, integrations are a key feature of your Bloomerang database and can take your fundraising efforts to the next level. So data should flow in and out of your Bloomerang database, connecting to other best-in-class tools your organization uses. And by keeping Bloomerang as the central hub of your tech stack, you'll create a global record of constituent engagement for your organization and really centralize your reporting efforts. Now, as we're also going to showcase today, in addition to connecting Bloomerang to other tools you may be using, as you can see in this illustration here, we can also use Zapier to leverage and create Bloomerang to Bloomerang automations that support operational procedures for your organization. You can't see it here, but imagine a little arrow going from one end of Bloomerang around to the other. So we can automate tasks within Bloomerang itself. Now, before we dive into our first use case, we want to do a poll to see how many of you are using Zapier and how many of you are using it with Bloomerang. Well, thanks, Margie. Went ahead and launched that poll for us. So go ahead and let us know if you're currently using Zapier, if you've even heard of Zapier before. And if you are using Zapier, are you using it with Bloomerang?
Looks like we've got about 32 out of 39 people. Oops, that prompted a couple more. Thank you for that. Wonderful. All right, Desi, would you like me to end it?
Yes, that'd be great. And then if you could just let me know kind of the makeup we have of, oh, there we go. I can see it here. So it looks like about a third of you have never heard of Zapier before. Some of you have heard of it, or maybe about half have heard of Zapier but never used it. And a couple of you are using Zapier currently. Perfect. So hopefully that little overview of we just did of Zapier, for those of you that aren't as familiar, gives you an idea of what Zapier is and why we consider it a tool for your Bloomerang database. Now, again, today we're going to be doing some live demos and walking through how you can actually set up an automation in Zapier. So it's going to give you that inside look into how that Zapier platform works. Now we're going to start today by demonstrating what we consider a standard flow to manage a member status and a member expiration date field in Bloomerang following a membership payment. Now I want to do one little caveat here. So the use cases we're going to demonstrate today are all based off of a use case of a membership program being built off of a member pays a due and then has member benefits for 365 days. There are many ways to administer membership programs, and so your membership program may look different than the one we are showcasing today. There are ways to develop similar automations for most every membership program. So if you administer your membership program differently and want to talk with us about your use case and how automations could work for you, at the end of our webinar, we will share our information again, and I'm happy to hop on a consult and talk through your use case and talk through what automations would look like for you. But today we're going to be focusing on what we consider a basic membership program, which is this idea of you pay your dues and then you're getting member benefits for 365 days. So the standard flow for membership will trigger when a new transaction payment is created in Bloomerang. So this is our revenue transactions here. We'll talk about this more here in a minute. And if that payment is a membership payment, we are going to update the constituent and code a member status field to active and ensure that the membership expiration date is updated to 365 days from the date of the transaction. So again, we're going to walk through this step by step here just to kind of give you an overview of what this looks like, and then we'll actually set it up in Zapier. So we're going to be using the new transaction payment trigger in the Bloomerang Zapier app. This will run for donations, recurring donation payments, and pledge payments, so our revenue transactions. And then we're going to have a filter to only continue the workflow if our campaign in Bloomerang is membership. Now, this could be based off of a fund or an appeal if you designate membership transactions in a different field. We're using campaign here today, but again, Zapier provides you with that flexibility. We're going to calculate our expiration date, and then we're going to update our constituent in Bloomerang. So the first step to this automation is to actually set up the custom fields that we're going to need in Bloomerang. So I've already set these up, so we're going to go ahead and hop into Bloomerang here in my Bloomerang sandbox. And what we are setting up is we are setting up custom fields on the constituent. So you can see here, zoom in a little bit. I've got 3 custom fields. For this first use case, we're just going to be using the first 2. So if I hadn't set up my fields already, I could create a category for my membership fields, or simply create a new field in a category. For our member status field, we're using a pick one because our status is going to be active or lapsed. For our membership expiration field, we're going to be using a type it in field that has a date as the data type. So you can see that right here, that I've got my status as a pick one and it's a text field. And I've got my options for active or lapsed. And for my expiration date, it's a free form field with a data type of date. Now I'm going to go ahead and showcase this third field here, even though we won't get to this until the next use case. But I'm going to go ahead and just flag this here. So membership level is the other field we're going to showcase here today. This is another pick one text field. So this is assuming that we had multiple levels of membership based off of the amount of dues or membership payment that is paid by the constituent. So you can see here for our demo, we just have our 4 tiers of bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. So this is again a pick one text field. So 3 very basic custom fields to set up on the constituent in Bloomerang. And we need to have these set up first so that when we hop into Zapier to set up our automation, we can map to these fields. So now that we have our custom field set up, we can set up our Zap. So I'm going to hop over to Zapier and I'm logged into my Zapier account here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to click create to create my new Zap. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here as well. So I'm just going to name my Zap. I'm going to call this our standard flow. And I'm going to start with Bloomerang as my trigger. So I'm selecting Bloomerang as my Zapier app that I'm using to trigger my automation. And every workflow in Zapier starts with a trigger. And the trigger is the data entry event that is going to cause this automation to run. So I'm going to go ahead and my event is going to be new transaction payment. And again, this is going to prompt my integration to run when a donation, a recurring donation payment, or a pledge payment is created in Bloomerang. I'm going to choose my Bloomerang account. Now there's options here that I could pull in my constituents' cumulative giving history or their household information. It's not needed for this use case, so I'm just going to leave these blank. But if that were needed for your use case, again, you could go ahead and pull in those details as well. So the next step to setting up our automation is to test our trigger and generate sample data. This will return the 3 most recently created transaction payments in Bloomerang. And these are samples only, so they're not going to run through the integration because they're created before our integration is turned on. So Zaps only run in real time, but by testing our trigger, we can pull in 3 recent transactions in order to use the details of those transactions to map the rest of our automation. So I had one here. I'm going to find one of my recent ones I had that had a perfect. Okay. I had created one that had a campaign of membership. So perfect. We've pulled in our sample here. And as you saw, it gave us 3 samples to choose from. We could use 1 or all 3 of those to support the mapping of our automation. Now, once we've gone ahead and pulled in our sample, our first action is actually to set up our filter. So this is where we are going to use Zapier's filter functionality. So this is a native utility in Zapier. And we're going to tell our automation to only continue if our campaign right here, our payment campaign name, exactly matches membership. So we are only going to allow our automation to continue running if the payment was actually for membership. So all of the other transactions that we're entering in Bloomerang for Giving Tuesday, year-end appeal, anything like that around this time of year, let's say specifically, is going to filter out and it's going to stop, meaning our cost in Zapier is going to stay lower because we're not running our Zap more than we need to, but also it's going to ensure that we are only continuing to update those custom fields on our constituents profile if the payment was actually for membership. So again, if you designate a transaction as being for membership and fund or appeal, you could choose that field instead. So again, you could choose the fund name or the appeal name. But again, in this use case, we're going to use campaign. I'm going to click continue, and it's going to allow me to test my filter here. And so Zapier is going to tell me if that sample transaction I chose, if it would have continued through my filter or not. Because my sample transaction had a campaign of membership, it's telling us that our Zap would have continued. If it had been something different, it actually would tell us that our Zap would have stopped. So again, allows us to test the logic criteria in our filter. Now, the other piece to note is that this value I've typed in over here for membership, this needs to match my value in Bloomerang exactly. So when I'm saying that my campaign name exactly matches membership, that needs to be exactly how my campaign is set up in Bloomerang. So it needs to match that value exactly. Now, after we set up our filter, we're going to add another action. And this time we're going to add the action right here to calculate our expiration date. So it's going to be our transaction date plus 365 days. So I'm going to click the little plus icon. And I'm going to use another Zapier utility. So instead of filter, I'm going to use format. For my event, I'm going to choose date time. This is going to allow us to work with our date and time fields. And for my transform, I'm going to choose add subtract time because we want to add 365 days to the date of the transaction. So in my input, this is where I'm going to enter my transaction date. My expression, there are some helpful resources here you can see right here in Zapier, but I'm going to type in my expression, which I'm going to add 365 days. So just, whoops, a plus sign, 365, and then I can actually write the word days. So Zapier is going to read that and know that we want to add 365 days to this date. The other piece I'm going to define is how I want my date to be formatted when it comes out. So I want to keep it in this year, month, day format. So I'm going to choose that as my format I want to keep it in. I also can define that in coming out of Bloomerang as well. It's giving it to me in that format, just to make sure Zapier knows that my format is remaining the same. Now, just in the same way we tested our filter, we can test this conversion as well. So we can test and make sure that our transaction date of 11/23/2022 becomes 11/23/2023. So adding 365 days. And you can see that it outputs that expiration date that I can now use when I update my constituent. So now that we've gotten this expiration date calculated, now we are ready to update our constituent in Bloomerang. So I'm going to add another action. Search for Bloomerang as my app. And for my event, or my action event, I'm going to choose update constituent right here. So we are updating an existing constituent. I'm going to choose my Bloomerang account. So the first thing we need to do in our update constituent action is we need to define which constituent we're updating. So our new transaction payment trigger is going to return the details for the constituent whose transaction that was. And there is a unique ID for that constituent. It's different than the account number, but that unique ID is what we want to map here. So we don't want to choose a value from this dropdown. This is just going to list all of our constituents in our database. Instead, we're going to choose custom. And under the new transaction payment right here, we are going to search for constituent ID. And you can see it pulls up that field right there. So this is going to allow my automation to dynamically ensure that I'm updating the same constituent that triggered my automation. So it's going to make sure we're using the same ID for the transaction or for the constituent who had that transaction to then update that same constituent. Now in this update constituent action, there are only two fields we need to map to. So all of these other fields on the constituent, we are going to leave these blank because we don't want our automation to change them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll all the way down to my membership status and my membership expiration date. Now, if my constituent made a membership payment, I want them to be considered an active member, so I can just select that value to ensure that we are assigning that they are an active member. And then I'm going to map the output from my step where I calculated the expiration date. So this is going to make sure that when it updates my constituent, they're getting a membership status of active and a membership expiration date of 11/23/2023. Now I could go ahead and test this action, similar as I did my other ones, and then publish my Zap and have it turn on. So this is the standard flow to set up, again, that we're triggering for that new donation, recurring donation payment, or pledge payment in Bloomerang that is coded as membership, to calculate our expiration date and update our constituent in Bloomerang. Now, again, in the slides here, I've got screenshots of everything we just went through. So when you get the slides after the webinar today, you'll be able to follow those step by step as well as the recording if you'd like to set up that automation. Now, I'd like to demonstrate how you can take this standard flow we just looked at and use it to also indicate which membership level or tier the member is in. So the solution that I'm going to demonstrate is going to use filters as we did in our standard flow. So if you remember, we had our filter here to only continue if the campaign is membership. We're going to use our filters to allow us to direct which membership level the payment was for. Now, I'd like to highlight that Zapier does have a paths functionality that could potentially be used based on not only the number of membership levels you have or your Zapier subscription, but if you are at a high enough subscription in Zapier, there is a functionality called paths that allows you to have branching logic in a single Zap or a single automation. I'd recommend checking out our Zapier 201 webinar if that feels like it's of interest to you. But today we're going to demonstrate this as if we don't have paths. So I'm going to go ahead and send the Zapier 201 webinar. I'm going to go ahead and send this in the chat. So that's going to give you more details on this paths versus filters piece I was mentioning here. Again, we're going to illustrate this use case with filters, which means we're going to have one Zap per membership level that we have. But if you have a couple of membership levels, and again, you have a high enough plan in Zapier, paths may be attractive as it would consolidate these Zaps into a single Zap. So when we talk about creating these different automations for each of our membership tiers, this means, again, we have one Zap or one automation per level or tier. So for this demo, we're going to pretend that our organization has 3 membership levels. Again, bronze, we're going to go with bronze, silver, and gold. Bronze has a membership that is $100 to $499.99. Silver is $500 to $999.99. And a gold membership is $1,000 or more. So we're going to say we have 3 different membership levels based off of the size of the payment that's made. And our automation in Zapier for each level is actually going to be nearly identical, not only to the standard flow we just showcased, but to the flows for each of those tiers, meaning the workflow that I'm showing right here is going to be the same for the bronze, silver, and gold, with just a slight variation to our filter that we're using here. So I'm going to show you how we would tweak the standard flow we just set up to account for those membership levels or tiers, and then how we could take, once we've built the flow for, let's say, the bronze level, how we could easily replicate that for silver or gold. So I'm hopping back into the standard flow we configured in the last demo. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to update this to reflect the bronze level. So I'm going to go ahead and call this now bronze. Now, the first thing we need to do is to add some additional criteria to our initial filter right here. So we want to keep our criteria for the campaign because we still only want to continue if that campaign is membership. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to click the and button to add some additional criteria. We're actually going to add 2 additional criteria. And what we're going to say is that essentially we are going to add criteria that only allows the Zap to continue if the amount of this transaction payment is between $100 and $499.99. So I'm going to come in and find my amount. And I'm going to say there's some amount or number operators in here. So there's greater than or less than. So I'm going to say I want to see that my amount is greater than $99.99. So is $100 or more. And then I'm going to use that amount field again, because I want to say that it's also less than 500. So this is allowing our automation to say we are only going to continue if it's a membership payment and the amount is essentially $100 to $499.99. Now I can test my filter again to see if it would have continued. And it would have, I can actually show you the details here, because the payment amount was $125, so it's greater than $99.99, but still less than $500, and my campaign was membership. Now, it's important when you do this to use the and logic, not the or logic, because you want to make sure that all of these criteria are correct and are met before the ZAP continues. So you want to make sure you're using that and logic. So now the only other tweak we would make to our standard flow is to come down to our update constituent action. And in addition to coding, everything else stays the same, but in addition to coding our membership status and membership expiration date, we could assign that our membership level should be bronze. Now in Zapier, if I were setting this up and I wanted to set up then my subsequent Zaps for silver and gold, what I would do is I would go ahead and skip this test. I would publish my first one, so publish my bronze. And then what Zapier allows us to do is it allows us to duplicate and copy a Zap we already have set up. So I can come in and take my bronze Zap and I'm just going to make a copy, duplicate it. I'm going to go into the editor here. This one's going to be silver. And all I need to do in this case is just to edit the amounts in my filter. So now I'm going to say that the amount is greater than $499.99, but it's less than 1,000. So just editing the amount for that next level or that next tier. Now, if you instead had separate campaign values for your different membership levels or tiers, you could do that instead of, or perhaps it's an appeal code, you could do that instead of using the amounts. So if you have existing coding, again, in Fund Campaign or Appeal, where you are designating your different membership levels or tiers, you could use that as your criteria instead of the amounts as we're demonstrating here. But I'm simply going to update my amounts and then come down to my update constituent action and change the membership level that's selected. So change it from bronze to silver. I can then publish my silver automation, and then I would again duplicate again and update for my gold membership level. So again, it's the same workflow for each of our membership levels or tiers. The difference is we are just updating the amounts in our filter criteria and the level code that we're assigning in our update constituent action. Now, these prior automations that we've been talking about, we're focused on how to ensure we are appropriately coding members as active in Bloomerang. We want to now shift our focus and demonstrate an automation that can be used to follow up with and attempt to recapture members who have lapsed. So it's important to note as we go into this flow that this is a bit more advanced than the standard flow and the flows we just showed for the membership levels, because this use case for sending a recapture email series to lapsed members will use additional automation tools to reach out. So this again is a more complex automation, and it may be that it simply triggers some ideas for your organization, or it may be a solution you want to pursue. A little bit different for every organization, but we think it's a really helpful one to take that process of following up with lapsed members off of your team members' plates and having to remember that manually, and really automating that recapture communication. So remember, this webinar is being recorded and you'll get the slides afterwards. So don't feel like you need to furiously take notes as we go through this next flow, which again is a bit more advanced. So if you've attended any of our other Bloomerang and Zapier webinars, you are likely familiar with the Bloomerang Zapier app by now. However, the Bloomerang Zapier app isn't the only way to trigger automations. We can also use scheduled reports in Bloomerang and a parsing tool to process that report. And this allows and opens up additional opportunities for automation, which could save your organization, again, some more time and energy. So the use case we're going to demo is how to trigger an automated email or even an email series in MailChimp when a member becomes lapsed. You could also structure this to be based off of a grace period, meaning after, if it's 30 days past their member expiration date. We're going to do it on the day it expires for this demo, but again, you could adjust that grace period if you want to allow for that. So the Bloomerang Zapier app does not include a trigger that will allow us to run an automation when a member's expiration date is reached, or again, within a certain number of days after that expiration date is reached. This is where scheduled reports become a part of the solution, as we can configure a report to return constituents whose expiration date is yesterday, perhaps 30 days ago, maybe 90 days ago, whatever your grace period is. So it really allows us to target which constituents we want to send this recapture series for. And again, you could choose to exclude certain membership levels or tiers if you wanted to from this as well. So when we trigger an automation from a Bloomerang scheduled report, the report needs to pass through an intermediary tool called a parser before the workflow can be triggered in Zapier. So that's right here. These two steps are running through that parsing tool. Now, a parsing tool's primary job is to extract information contained in an email or an attachment in a way that can be used to further and or essentially parse the information out in a way that then that data can be used in further steps in our automation. So for example, if you were to forward an email to a parsing tool, rules could be set up to extract the email sender's name and email address, the date the email was sent, the body of the email, and who the recipient was. For the purpose of this webinar, we're going to be using a parsing tool to extract each row in our scheduled report as a separate record to trigger our automation. Without the parsing tool, there's no way for Zapier to pull apart the different records in a report or appropriately identify the different fields, meaning the columns, that are included in our report for each record. Now, it's important to note that the parsing tool we're going to be showcasing today is not included in your Bloomerang or your Zapier subscription. A parsing tool is a separate automation tool with its own subscription. And so throughout the remainder of this webinar, we'll be demonstrating this use case using Mail Parser. It's a really popular parsing tool. We found it to be very user-friendly, it's reliable, and we have found that it is competitive when it comes to pricing. So again, we're going to be using Mail Parser for our demo today. There are other parsing tools out there if you wanted to explore those, but it is an additional automation tool beyond Bloomerang and your Zapier subscription. Now, the first thing we need to do for this solution is to set up our parsing inbox in Mail Parser. So after I log into Mail Parser, I've gone ahead and logged in here. I would go ahead and create a new inbox, and I would call it, for lapsed members or something similar. When I create my parsing inbox, Mail Parser is going to give me a unique email address for that inbox. So every parsing inbox you set up, Mail Parser is going to generate a new email address. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, because this is what I'll use when I'm setting up my scheduled report in Bloomerang, because we want that scheduled report to send to this email address. So once I've set up my inbox, now I can hop back to Bloomerang. So the next step in Bloomerang would be to set up our scheduled report. So after I log into Bloomerang, I'm going to go to the reports page and build a new constituent report from scratch right here, constituents. Now I'm going to name my report. In this case, I'm going to do lapsed members yesterday. go ahead and save this. And for my filters, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to search for my member expiration date custom field that we are updating via our standard flows. And I'm going to say that my membership expiration date was yesterday, meaning yesterday was the last day of their membership. They're now expired. And today I want to send them or start them on my recapture series in MailChimp. The other piece I forgot about this is we also want to make sure that we are only sending those whose membership status is also active. So they were active, their membership is expired. We want to go ahead and send them to their capture series. Now, again, you could adjust your filters to only capture members who expired 30 days ago, 90 days ago. Again, if you wanted to provide a grace period and not trigger this recapture series right away, there are ways to design your filters in your report to account for that. Now I need to modify the columns in my report to ensure all the data I need is included. So we want to make sure we have the account number. Don't need our address information. So account number, name, potentially want to pull in our membership custom fields. So our status, our expiration date, and our level. Email. Now it's important with the columns we're setting up that we want to note the ordering of our columns here. So the reason why is because when Mail Parser parses our report, they actually provide the data back in Zapier referencing the columns. So it's column 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when you're sending a report, just something to note for yourself. So we could go ahead and say van, schedule our report. We want this to send daily. And we're going to do this at a reasonable time because we don't want to trigger our email and MailChimp to go out at midnight or 3 a.m. to our lapsed members. We want it to go to a reasonable time. For our recipient, this is where I'm going to add my Mail Parser email address. Lapsed members yesterday. And the one thing we do want to do is we want to check this box that says if there's no results, don't send an email. So we don't want to send a report off to our parsing tool if there are actually no members who are expired and need to be sent through that recapture series. So we'd go ahead and check that box and click Save and Schedule. Now, if you're doing this at your own organization, you'd need to wait overnight for the first scheduled report to deliver to your Mail Parser inbox, or have the report sent once to the inbox before scheduling it to run on a daily basis, because we need at least one report to come through to Mail Parser to set up what are called our parsing rules. So I already have one set up. So I'm going to go ahead and go back here. So I've got a parsing inbox already set up here for our demo here. You can see I've sent 2 tests to it. But once you have your parsing inbox set up and your first report comes through, you then get to set up your rules in Mail Parser. So the rules in Mail Parser are us telling the automation tool, telling Mail Parser how to pull apart the data in our scheduled report. So let's go ahead and take a look at the rules that I've set up for our Bloomerang report. So I've got one rule here. So this rule, we're selecting the data source of the attachment. So we're not pulling the details from the email itself. We want to pull from the attachment. And it goes ahead and in that first report I sent over, it goes ahead and pulls some of the initial data. I get to parse the attachment. So I'm telling it that I want to parse the table cells. It's an Excel file. And you can see that it's actually showing me my data that came out in my report. So I can see a few rows as an example. This all comes by default. So if we were to go back and set up a new parsing rule, that piece of it when I choose my attachment, and I choose to parse my table cells for an Excel file, all of that happens automatically. There's only one additional rule or table filter I need to add, and that is to remove a row. So I want to remove my header row, so the one that has my column names in it, because we don't want that syncing to MailChimp. It's going to throw an error every time because there's no email address in it. So we're going to go ahead and remove rows, and we're just going to go ahead and remove the first row. So you can see that again, it's showing me a preview. It's applying my parsing rule, and then it's showing me what the output would be, meaning my first row, which was my column headers, is now gone. That is the only additional rule you will need to add in Mail Parser. So once we've set that up, we can say, okay, looks good, and we can name our rule. And save that. So you'll see now that there's two rules. One is the one I originally set up for our demo, and then the other one we just set up, and they're both set up the same way. Now, again, if this parsing inbox feels a little advanced, it is. So give yourself a little bit of grace. If you need to watch the recording back, I encourage you do so. This will be likely the piece that feels the most sticky if you tried, or when you try to set this up yourself. So again, watch the webinar, pause it as you go through the process, set up those parsing rules. Again, the slide deck does have screenshots of all of those parsing rules as well. So when you get the slide deck after the webinar, you can reference that too. Now, once our parsing inbox is all set up, we can hop over to Zapier to set up our automation. So this is our actual automation right here, where for each row parsed by Mail Parser, we're going to add or update our subscriber in MailChimp, and then create a custom event in MailChimp. And I'll talk about what the custom event does in MailChimp here in just a second. So I'm going to go to Zapier, and I'm going to create another Zap. So in this case, I'm going to choose Mail Parser as my triggering app, and I'm going to choose New Email Parsed. So this will trigger for each row of that report that is parsed out, not just once for the report being sent. So I'm going to go ahead and choose my account. I'm going to choose my inbox. So you can have many parsing inboxes set up. I'm going to go ahead and choose my one that I set up for our webinar. And similar to our Bloomerang trigger, I'm going to test my trigger to pull in a sample from that one report I sent over to set up my parsing rules. You can see I've got everything right here. There we go. See, I've got all my details that came through, and you can see this is what I was talking about where I said to reference your column order, because it's going to give us just the column numbering for the report, not the actual names of those columns. So now that I have set up my trigger and pulled in some sample data, I can go ahead and add my MailChimp step to add or update my subscriber. So this is really just to make sure that the constituent is in my MailChimp audience, and that's required before we can add them into an automation in MailChimp to trigger that email or email series. So I'm going to choose my audience, not my email, which was column number 5 in my report. I'm not using first name, last name in my MailChimp audience, but I am going to map the full name of my account. I'm going to go ahead and map that in here. Click continue. And similar to all of our other actions, I can test my add or update subscriber in MailChimp to make sure that my constituent gets added successfully to MailChimp. And there we go. We've gone ahead and it's made sure my constituent's in there. And now we can add the second MailChimp action, which is to create a custom event. So a custom event is a unique thing in the MailChimp Zapier app that allows us to create almost like an interaction in Bloomerang, a similar type of an idea, but creates this custom event for the subscriber in MailChimp that allows us to use that as a triggering event for a MailChimp automation. So a MailChimp automated single email or potentially an email series could be triggered from this. So I'm going to choose my audience. And again, my same audience, and I'm going to map my same email. And I'm going to give my custom event a name. In this case, I'm going to call it lapsed member. We can set properties, which would be data elements that we may want to pull in as a merge field in our email. So in this case, I'm actually going to add two properties. I'm going to add my membership level. Let's remove silver. And then my expiration. So the expiration date for that membership. Because I may want to pull these into my recapture email series and say something along the lines of, hi, your membership is expired on this date. If you'd like to renew your membership level of silver and provide the details or a link to my payment page where the constituent could then go and renew their membership. So I'm going to go ahead and use those two properties. Now we could go ahead and test this action and then turn our Zap on. I'm actually going to show you here in MailChimp what this looks like. I did a test of this earlier. And to show you what the custom event looks like, you can see right here that it just pulls in those details in this activity feed for the subscriber. We can see their expiration and the level, and that they have this event, this custom event of lapsed member. Now, I want to show you how your automation in MailChimp could be set up using this custom event as that starting point. So in MailChimp, I'm going to go to automations and go to all journeys. And I already have one set up here, so I'm going to go ahead and just click in and show you this. So I went ahead and started an email series in MailChimp. And what we're doing is that as our starting point, there are many different ways that you can start an automated email series or a single email in MailChimp. A tag being added, a new subscriber is added to your audience, but in this case, we are going to choose API and integrations, and we are using the Zapier custom event. So when that custom event is created in Zapier and it's added to that subscriber in MailChimp, it's going to start this MailChimp automation to send one or more emails based off of what we've set up. So we're choosing our Zapier custom event, and then we're just using the same custom event name as we set up here in Zapier. So you could copy and paste this directly from Zapier, but we're using the same custom event name. So when that custom event is created through our automation, it's going to go ahead and use that to then trigger this email series. Now, MailChimp's customer journey builder or their automation builder is really easy to use. You can add delays, you can add branching logic, you can send emails, you can add tags. So again, we just have a single email here where you could go ahead and pull that up, customize your email that would go out to try and recapture that member. So again, we have a current client that has an automation similar to this, and they actually have a 3 or 4 email series that goes out to their lapsed members to try and get them to re-engage and renew their membership. So you could, again, have this set up as a single email or multiple emails. Now, the one piece I'm not going to get a time to demo because I want to get through a final piece here, but those email properties that we had set up, again, this will be in the slide deck. There is a way to put them into your email, again, as a merge field. It's not going to pop up as a selection in MailChimp, but you can manually add using these formats here, that expiration or that level property that we added to our custom event, you can pull those in as merge fields in your email. So a really great feature there if you want to pull those data elements into your email to customize it a bit more for that constituent. Now, we were asked recently about a use case that we felt was relevant to today's session. It was not part of our original agenda, but may apply if you use an external membership app or tool. So some organizations prefer to use a membership management tool outside of Bloomerang to manage and administer their membership program. And depending on the app that is used, there is the potential for Zapier automation, and the robustness of that sync may vary from app to app. But the question we were asked was, if we have a membership ID generated in our other tool, our other membership tool, can we add that to the constituent in Bloomerang? And the answer is yes. In its most basic form, the automation would trigger when a new member is created in your membership tool and that membership ID is generated. Then the automation would need to find or create the constituent in Bloomerang. If it doesn't match to an existing constituent, a new one would be created right here, and that membership ID would be added to a Bloomerang custom field. If it did match to an existing constituent, we then can update that constituent and add that member ID to that same custom field on that constituent's profile. So the answer is yes. If you use an outside membership management tool, there are ways to sync that data into Bloomerang, whether it be as simple as just a membership ID, or actually some of that additional membership data, depending on the tool, could potentially be synced to Bloomerang as well. Now, I did see a quick question in here that I want to answer. Someone asked the question of, I see email parser by Zapier is included with my Zapier subscription. Does the email parser app has advantages, or does the email parser by Zapier app, could that be used? And the answer is unfortunately no. Email parser by Zapier, the Zapier native utility, is intended for parsing emails only. So the last time we had taken a look at it, it doesn't allow for the parsing of attachments like the scheduled report that comes from Bloomerang. So you likely would need to look to a parsing tool to parse that attachment. So email parser by Zapier is meant primarily for parsing emails themselves, not attachments. So that was a good question. If anyone else had come across that question, wanted to make sure we got that one answered. So getting started with Bloomerang and Zapier is really easy. First step is to sign up for a Zapier account. There's a 14-day free trial, and there is also a 15% nonprofit discount. I know that Diana sent the link for that in the chat earlier. So if you qualify as a nonprofit, definitely go ahead and sign up for that 15% discount if you decide to sign up for Zapier. After you sign up for Zapier, it's really easy to connect to Bloomerang. You go to My Apps, you click Add Connection, you search for and select Bloomerang, and then you will grant access to connect Bloomerang to Zapier using your Bloomerang login credentials. So very easy to connect to Bloomerang. Other tools you use may have different authentication procedures, but for Bloomerang, it's going to be your username and password for your Bloomerang login. If you prefer to build your automations DIY or want to learn more about Zapier, there are plenty of resources available. I've linked a few here just so that you can have them to look back on when you get the slide deck following today's webinar, but lots of great resources out there to support you. Also, if you'd like to work with a consultant to set up an integration or explore your use case or your tech stack, please let us know. This could be related to membership or completely unrelated. Our team at Sidekick Solutions is always happy to hop on a call and talk through a use case or any other tools that you're using and determine if there is the potential for automation. Now, I'd love to open it up. I know that Margie and Diana have been helping in the chat in the Q&A today. Looks like there's a good question. It seems that all the examples in today's webinar have to do with membership-related use cases, where there'll be a list of suggested other use cases where Zapier automations might be useful. That's a great question. Looks like in response to that one, Diana had actually, or Margie had sent a link to the Bloomerang page, but I actually want to direct you as well to we'll make sure that it gets in the follow-up email or the resources. But we did an Exploring Bloomerang Automations webinar earlier this year in Bloomerang Academy that talks through different use cases for automation with Bloomerang and how to approach automation for Bloomerang. So we'll make sure that gets sent out. The link to that webinar is, I think that'll be one you'll find really helpful. And then the other question was, can we offer free memberships or must there be a payment transaction to trigger? So that's a great question. If you offer free memberships, there are other types of automations that can be set up to manage those membership types. So if you're interested in exploring those, feel free to reach out and we can talk through your use case. But the answer is yes, there are ways to trigger and update and manage free memberships where perhaps there isn't a transaction related to that membership payment. I know we're coming up on time. I'm happy to stay on a couple more minutes. If anyone else has any questions they want to send in the chat or the Q&A, or Margie or Diana, if you came across any questions you think would benefit the group, feel free to throw them out there as well.
Jessie, thank you so much for being here with us today and delivering all this great information. I think that this has been a really valuable webinar, and we're really grateful to you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always a pleasure. We love sharing the knowledge of everything you can do with Bloomerang and Zapier, and our door is truly always open. So if your organization has any questions, feel free to reach out. Also, Bloomerang support team is great as well. If you have questions about the Bloomerang side of, again, the custom fields or the scheduled reports we walked through today, they are a great resource to help you get those set up.
Awesome. Thank you, Jessie. And to everyone, thank you for being here with us today. We will share all of this information, including the contact info for Sidekick Solutions and Jessie in an email coming soon to your inbox. So thank you all once again. Don't forget to visit our Academy website and look for more sessions coming up in the future. Everyone have a great afternoon.